Now we have Hamish, who will be talking what we've learned about earthquake early warning from local sensor networks. So Hamish, you can share screen.
How's that? Can everyone see that?
It looks good.
Right. Thank you. Tēnā koutou, and thanks for the introduction, and thanks everyone for your time this morning. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hamish Avery, and I'm the CTO at Canterbury Seismic. But one of the most favourite bits of my job is being in forums such as this and being involved in new ideas, so I'm really happy to be presenting. I'm perhaps going to go a little bit off track from what Marianne introduced me for. I guess as I started writing this, I started thinking a little bit more deeply about not just what we've learned, but what I've learned working in this group as well. So earthquake early warning is of great interest here in Aotearoa. We're a seismically active nation, and the last 10 years or so have really reminded us that we need to be better prepared and more resilient when it comes to natural disasters. For earthquakes, the ultimate goal is prediction, which would really allow us to minimise life and economic losses. However, we're a long way from that. But what we do have within our grasp is the ability to get an earthquake early warning. And given this field has had such big successes internationally, it seems almost bizarre that we don't have that sort of technology here, and given our risk and our fact that we're technologically advanced. I'd like to share a little bit about what our thinking is around earthquake early warning at CSI, and ultimately how I think community earthquake early warning might be one of the quickest ways to move us forward in this area. I'm going to start talking about some of the pros and cons of each option for earthquake early warning that we've looked at, and then summarise what I think might be a good way forward. So this is what I was supposed to talk about, local networks. Connected low-cost sensors really allow communities to participate in developing seismic networks. People with sensors on their garage floors can really add to a common pool that allows us to detect real events, discriminate against false ones, and deliver real-time information. The biggest problem with this is that the local networks need the shaking to arrive within the network before we can generate any sorts of alerts. Our company runs several such networks like this, and you can see the sensors we've got there in Christchurch. But you know, we get earthquake early warning alerts from this, and often my phone will ping off before we feel the quake, but it's only a second and a half. And while that's enough to sort of go, oh, the earthquake, it's not really enough to do anything except perhaps drive some of the more automated alerts. Another thing we looked at was using the sort of P-wave type algorithms. And these are a really good way of getting an alert at a local point at a pretty modest cost. I think it works really well environments where the dominant risk is from large distant sources, such as Taiwan and really notably Mexico City. And we've got those same sort of large distant sources here at Aotearoa as well, the Alpine Fault and the Hikurangi subduction zone. However, here we also have significant risks from local sources. Our capital lies over 4 major fault lines, and now we know Christchurch also has significant local faults. With the sort of delays that you need to process this type of algorithm, we've sort of looked at it and thought that, you know, if anything's within about 40 kilometres of the sensor, it doesn't really deliver any meaningful alerts. And I think that greatly reduces the effectiveness of this here, even though it's a really great idea. So that brings us to the sort of traditional approach. And a distributed national network gives us the best possible early warning. It's because we can measure the shaking right at the source, and whether that's near or far away. With an Alpine Fault event, we could get as much as 70 seconds of warning in Wellington if it started to rupture down in the Haast end of it. Christchurch, from the same sort of event, would give us around 40 seconds. 70 and 40 seconds is a lot of time, and it's a really useful level of early alert. However, installing something like this requires a huge upfront investment. given that we've already got the national seismic network operated by GeoNet, it would seem like the obvious step would be to upgrade GeoNet for this application. That goes back to that point I made about, you know, trying to find an open protocol to speed up that data transmission. But there's really not been a lot of talk about spending money on GeoNet to do this. And even if we did do that, it would be some years until that's available and useful. Commercially, it's a challenge. There's a huge commercial investment to roll out such a network, and I guess the biggest challenge that we've looked at in this space is how do you get a return on that investment? How can you monetize something that if people are excluded from it are going to be markedly worse off? And I think that's a challenge that no one really wants to face. So how do I think that we can actually deliver it in New Zealand? I think the best option is to use a national network because this delivers the best warning time. But without that political will and that funding to grow our own national network and improve it, that's not going to happen as a centralized initiative. There's been very little work done in that space or discussion about how that might be brought forward. Community-driven initiatives are an excellent way to grow networks of sensors, and we heard the comment before about having a weather station at home, and also things like web cameras and that. And perhaps this might be a bit counter to the earlier point, but you know, a weather station is really a local sensor for a local benefit. And I think that for communities to generate meaningful earthquake early warning alerts, we need to think in a wider sense of what my sensor does for me, but what it does for others. But so I think we need to connect. We need to connect all these local, these dispersed community sensors, and feed them into a pool that delivers the benefit of everyone's sensors for everyone else. And I think one of the big challenges here is that we need to find a mechanism that ensures there is a wide participation in it, irrespective of whether a particular community can afford to fund it, so that everyone can actually participate, so that everyone benefits. And I think I've probably run over time unless I've gabbled a bit too fast there, but I'd like to end on my belief that I think we can really do this, but we really need to work together, and we need to find a way to make sure everyone can be included in it. So yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Hamish. That's a good presentation, and yeah, really interesting points that you raised. So moving along, we'll have we asked Bill from PAlert, from Jenlogix, to talk a little bit more about the PAlert system. Unfortunately, he's sick today, and Keith also probably caught on his whatever he has. But they've sent me their presentations before, and I was actually in contact with Bill prior to today, and we were discussing what to present. So I'm going to run through the slides that they shared. Hopefully I do it justice, and Keith, please feel free to jump in, but he's having a coughing fit at the moment, so he's asked me to just run through the slides. So it will be pretty quick, but I just wanted to make sure that they're not left out of this conversation. But so I'll just share my screen and share that to everyone, and just have a little bit of idea about some of the things that's happening at Jenlogix. So can people see this slide? Oops, sorry. Okay. Right. So I'm just going to talk through this so basically, I think we've learned from Garrick earlier that there's different systems, I guess, in a way to do earthquake early warning. And I guess with the PAlert system, this is basically a system that was developed from Professor Wu at Taiwan National University, and it's being used around the world. So it's in many cases, such as in Taiwan, Indonesia, and Mexico, etc. And it's been operational for a while. So it's again based on the system in Taiwan. So just a bit of, if people can see that. Oops. Yeah. So it's a system that's being currently used. So I guess here just some benefits to using the PAlert system is that it provides on-site health and safety, and then an ability to do earthquake early warning. But also there's also like local seismic switch, and if it is part of a network such as that in Taiwan, it can provide a regional earthquake early warning system. So I think one of the things when I was discussing with Bill is this case that happened in 2016, that a user here in Wellington was actually warned a few seconds before shaking happened. So this is a real example wherein an alert was given prior to shaking using this system. And I guess one of the things, as Julia might have mentioned, is that we have, and Caroline, we have a different user base. There's the general public, but there's also industry and commercial applications. And I think one of the things that's possible is that we could have seismic switch and alarms. And I think these are some of the examples that have been used in real situations, such as in Google. I think in Wellington Water, they will use this PAlert system to reduce water pressure if there's a major shake. And there's also other cases in where they use the system, not only for earthquake early warning, but as a seismic switch and alarm. And if you guys have heard of Professor Wu in Taiwan, and they have a quite broad network in Taiwan using this system. And I think Hamish have mentioned that this particular system might work for their case because of the how Taiwan is built, and I guess I'm not a seismologist, but how the fault systems there work. So it works pretty well for them, and it's a potential to have a regional earthquake early warning system using PAlert. So I've run that through. I hope I did it some justice. And if you have any questions, I'm sure Bill and Keith would be happy to talk about it and happy to connect with people in this room as well. But that's running it through, and hopefully Keith can answer some questions if you're not too sick. Yeah. But we're opening the floor for questions as well for Hamish with the points that he's raised in his presentation, and anyone else in the floor to maybe our previous speakers as well.
Yeah, we have about 15 minutes now.
Cool. It's Caroline Holden here. I have a comment for Hamish. I think you'll be happy to hear there's some good news in here, because in terms of providing a national earthquake early warning, there's just been a significant funding put into research to test how an earthquake early warning would benefit the emergency responders end. So this is the project I'm leading, and it's actually not done in isolation, because I'm also heavily involved with the early warning for citizen science, based on citizen science, that Raj and Marian and Julia are leading as well. So the time is it's really exciting, because we've got this whole, we're looking at the national level, but also we're also, just like you mentioned it, local networks, and doing it for citizen science is a different beast than looking at national level. But we're not doing it in isolation. We're actually talking to each other, and me being in this presentation today and the other workshops is the great sign. Now, I had a question about your the 1 second early warning that you provide. I'm just intrigued to know what is the algorithm based on it. Thank you.
Yeah, but no, we certainly don't provide it. It's just a I guess an artifact of how we've made our network. You know, when it detects the shaking, it sends out an alert to say, you know, that the system's working, and that it's measuring the quake. But you know, by virtue of the fact that the sensors are spread across the whole city, we often get that before. It's certainly not something we market or sell as earthquake early warning. We're very wary of that. It's more a accidental byproduct, maybe we call it. Hey, look, I heard your earlier comment about that, and about, you know, that funded research, and it's really good. I'm really pleased to hear that. I guess my point was not around so much the you know, how it might be done, but more about what sort of upgrades would be needed to the actual physical network to make that happen. And I guess that goes back to that comment I made earlier, or really desire to have an open, high-speed early warning protocol to transfer the data, because, you know, we all see that delay, not through the communications channel, not through your back end, but actually through the sensor and through SeedLink. Yeah, so I guess that it's really encouraging to hear that, and yeah, great.
Yeah, that's a really fair comment, because I tend to forget about the communication and the sensor latency when I just focus on the seismological problem and the end user part. So yeah, it's great to be participating to this kind of workshops, to just be reminded that there's another issue here, and to keep working with that expertise. Yeah.
Yeah, great.
So we just have a comment from Keith. He just said, just a note that the Jenlogix PAlert commercial users make their data freely available to GNS to consume as well. So I guess that's pretty good to have intercollaboration.
Gavin has his hand raised.
Go ahead, Gavin.
Thank you. I'm doing Zoom in the browser, so I haven't actually got the option to put my hand up in app, so I thought I'd use the camera. I just kind of want to tie a couple of things we've been talking about together in the context and link them to some of the challenges we've had with community rollout of tsunami sirens. And it comes back to, you know, the desire for communities to implement warning systems and the like locally, and what can happen if we don't have standards in place when those systems are implemented. So if the desire and the will to implement systems leads the desire and will to have good open systems, you will get what we've had in New Zealand over the last 15 years or so, with the rapid introduction of community-based tsunami warning sirens. But they've all taken different approaches to the signals, i.e. the tones that the sirens use, as well as the meaning of those sirens. So I think right now we're at a really critical point where I think we really have to try and nail how we're going to design an open system and get those standards in place quickly before at-risk communities, and, you know, some of the South Island ones like the Tekapos, like the Fox and Franz Josephs and the like, really have an interest in, well, we want something like this to give us a heads up, and they go ahead and implement the technology before there's a good standards-based platform for it. So just a word of caution, but also a massive opportunity for us all to actually try and do what wasn't done with tsunami warning sirens, and get the standards in place before the systems actually get implemented. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Gavin. That's really good comments there. And I think you're right. This is a chance for us. We have an opportunity here before systems are in place. So it's good to be aware of that as well, of this opportunity. Anyone else has a comment or question?
Hi, my name is Sangra.
Hi, go ahead. Yes.
One question I have, like, depending on sensors in noisy environments, is there any work or investigation done in improving the dependability, like, of those environments, especially noisy environments sensors?
Yeah, that is a good question. And I think we've seen from Garrick's presentation that there's that level of noise, and it is a challenge, I guess, in creating systems. If Rasika's online, maybe you can share a bit of your work on this. So I'm not too sure if Rasika's online, but I just saw that Raj just popped in again. So Raj, there's been a question about, is there work on noise on with these sensors and managing the noise that it detects and so on? If you could share a little bit. Sorry, Raj, you're on mute at the moment.
Yeah, it's a big problem, and it's a bigger challenge, and probably a couple of or more PhD research questions. But yeah, we are planning to bring at least kind of one PhD student, hopefully soon, to look at what we can do. Yeah, I mean, household sensor networks, I think that's one of the bigger challenges I saw in the earlier presentation as well. So in my house, we have, at my place, I have one sensor. So we collect all these different things, and when we see what's going on, it's obvious, right? So you have a lot of noise. So at some point, we have to look at. But on the other hand, I mean, there are different ways to do it. People are trying different ways, but when we have a denser networks, always triangulation and kind of these things can also help, I think. But it's very early. Probably we'll know more as we do some work on this. Yeah, probably Caroline can add something to it.
Yeah. I just jump in because one quick fix is actually redundancy. So by having a lot of instruments, you can bias the fact that there's a lot of noise. You just have more data by having more instruments very close together. The other way to bypass this problem is actually to understand the earthquake signal. And the earthquake signal would be very different from someone tap dancing in your floor or just the noise of a truck passing by as well. So by involving seismologists, please do. You can actually also improve that problem with the noise.
Thanks. So I think it's quite obvious that there's definitely more work to be done in this space. There's still lots of opportunities to do research and find out more. Anyone else have a question?
Yeah, if I could just jump into that Caroline. Does SeisComp and that perform that sort of discrimination against cultural noise versus earthquake signals?
Yes, it does. So SeisComp P3 for everyone, it's the earthquake location algorithm that GeoNet uses. So it's a worldwide, well-used algorithm to locate earthquakes. And so what it does is it takes a minimum amount of station to actually have a robust earthquake location. So that's how it bypassed the fact that one station might trigger because a cow is just walking by, or or it's really windy in Wellington, and so you get the instruments triggering. But it takes a minimum amount of station to trigger and then to start the process of locating the earthquake. So this is another latency into a potential early warning system that you need a minimum amount of stations to start having a robust location. But yeah, that's the way they're doing it. They're also doing it by having stations in rather quiet areas. So we have our strong motion stations are in urban areas. But the more sensitive stations, the national stations, are usually in very more quiet, remote places of New Zealand.
Okay, and I think that's a really good case for the one of your comments in the chat there about how community-based sensors might really be able to augment that if they feed into GeoNet. So instead of having if you look at the GeoNet network. It's quite sparse in some of the places where, perhaps we might want to have more sensors, especially actually down the fault, the alpine fault, and having, another 20, 30 sensors from the community feeding into that, I think would really improve that SeisComp performance and help us drive faster alerts, even if the community is feeding into the GeoNet system as opposed to a separate system or in parallel.
Yeah, that would be ideal. Yeah. So GeoNet is already taking a lot of different type of data in, and maybe adding a stream where it's a citizen science-driven stream to contribute to the earthquake for early warning purpose, not earthquake location purpose, but for earthquake early warning purpose would be great. Yeah.
And yeah, just to add, I mean, as I mentioned, so from IoT point of view, so we are talking about node and edges and edge computing and noise, kind of reducing noise in edges. there are a lot of research going on in that space. So redundancy definitely improve, but if we can save another millisecond at the edge, I think that also helps. So I think going forward, I mean, purely from IoT perspective, as Caroline knows, my knowledge around seismology is really limited. But since we are working together, I think we can do a better job, that we can probably save that millisecond at the edge, and also use the synergy redundancy of having more nodes. So that is where I think this new PhD student that we are going to recruit, that we are going to look at how we can do that, bringing in some non-traditional methods, looking at noise reduction at the edges and nodes. Yeah.
This is really exciting, thinking about sort of like how this could happen. And on Tuesday there was we talked about how we're still in that sort of discovery phase of technology and what it really has to offer people. But just something that we haven't really talked about today that I thought I'd throw out there for anybody, our participants and our listeners as well, is really that question around how do we justify to our communities why we are elevating technology to enhance societal resilience over other issues that are more pertinent to them every day. So those sort of everyday emergencies. How we've got a lot of people out there that are working on the technology side of things, and so I'm just wondering what thoughts you have around sort of socializing the technology and the uptake of it, and yeah, how we can actually justify that we're focusing on earthquake resilience over other societal issues. Any thoughts?
I have a few. Look, I think that's a really key thing, and I think as I was thinking about how how you would actually implement a nationwide network of earthquake early warning, I realized that there's going to be huge areas that aren't in a position or won't prioritize it over more pressing needs and more urgent uses of their money. And I think it's a real key challenge. And I did wonder whether or not there's some sort of option, because, those that can afford to put one in, it's not for them. It's going to give an alert for someone further away than them. And I wondered if there's not a way that there could be some sort of, if they buy a sensor, there's a certain amount of that's contributed to people that can't afford one, or communities that can't afford them. Sort of like, I guess kind of like an equalizing mechanism where, those that have the money that can afford them chip in a little bit more. And with a number of people doing that, we could actually have sensors that we could put in places that can't afford them, so they're not seeing themselves as being penalized by not being able to contribute.
Cool, thanks. Anyone else have a thought on Emily's hard question on how do we justify communities why we're elevating technology to enhance societal resilience over other issues that may be more pertinent to them?
We've talked, I was going to say we've talked a little bit about previously, sort of just in discussions about like multiple uses of sensors and like kind of having multiple functions. So I mean, I don't know if that's just still, it's still kind of focused on, I guess, a particular issue that you might want to solve that might be broader than, just going down to the grocery store and getting your bread because you can't afford it. So those things are like still separate issues that people might be more focused on. But yeah, we have had some discussions about how can you kind of make these things available so that they have kind of multiple functions, or they kind of cover multiple issues that people might be interested in or people might be affected by. I mean, I'm not a seismologist or a technology person, but somebody else might be able to comment more on that, on whether that's possible.
Cool. Thanks, Julia.